Welcome to Now and Zen, the new podcast dedicated to the topic of alternative tuning systems in music. The music you just heard was The Practice Of by Jack Tickner. Jack joins me and Stephen today to tell us all about his sounds, how he modifies his guitars, and his impressions of microtonal music. Hello everyone, we're joined today by Jack Tickner. Hey Jack, how are you going?
Hello, I'm very well. I'm a bit sleepy. It's 6 a.m. and very warm here in Australia. I'm probably talking far too loud for my neighbours, but that's okay, because it's for microtones.
Yes!
That's right, that's the attitude we like. You know, it was quite difficult getting this call to happen because the three of us are in totally different time zones, so we really appreciate that you made all the effort to get up early, because it's not something that I like to do.
It's absolutely fine. I'm really stoked to be here. I've listened to all the podcasts so far. Yeah, it's really great you guys are doing this.
This is just fantastic to have you on. Would you care to talk about some of your upcoming projects, releases, what you think the Now and Zen audience should know about and be listening to?
Oh, absolutely. It'd be my pleasure. So I play in a band called Basil's Kite, and Basil's Kite is... I guess you could say like kind of like a Frank Zappa-ish, very fast, lots of changes, but nice. more metal or more hardcore, I guess. And we're currently playing in a just intonation 10-note scale because we went to 22 notes and then we found out that it was very hard to, I guess, rock out with 22 tones.
Yes.
Requires lots of concentration.
Oh yeah, I bet it does. So does everybody in the band have an instrument that's tuned? You know, do you all play fixed pitch instruments?
Yeah. So I can show you. I know it doesn't do much for the listening audience, but here's the guitar. So you might notice that it's a bit of a shorter scale.
So you still have the dots from 12-tone equal temperament, but you have moved the frets around to be where you would like them.
Yeah. So everything's different on here except for the octave. But yeah, there's no reason for that I kept the dots aside from I don't know how to get rid of them. I'm a bit of an amateur when it comes to that. But yeah, my other project, Maybe Pile, we have an album coming out later this year, and it's got all kinds of different tunings, fretless, my 22-tone scale, the Irv Wilson's Metapalog scale, and 12 equal temperament. And my last thing I'm going to mention is my own solo work, and in that I predominantly use my 22-tone JI scale.
Very cool. So you have mentioned JI and equal tunings a lot. Do you have any favorites or thoughts on why you should use one or the other? Because you seem to have experience with a lot of instruments that actually play those tunings, and it's pretty remarkable because a lot of people who play in a lot of different tunings, myself included, usually only have like a few like real guitars, you know, that are fretted in the tuning, or just one fretless guitar or something.
Yeah. So you're asking if I have any favorites?
Yeah, if you have any favorites, and why do you think somebody should use JI instead of an EDO or vice versa? Or maybe you have no thoughts on that at all.
Well, I quite like JI because I for the same reason a lot of people don't like it. I really love the I love the fact you can change key and that key will sound completely different to the previous key. And then on guitar, you get all these really tiny intervals between strings. I tune most of my guitars to D-A-D, G-A-D. So it means I get the lattice that I want, plus a fifth away from it, and plus a fifth below it.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So it's sort of like,
cool.
Yeah. So just lots and lots of microtones, essentially.
So it's the sheer possibilities and all those options that attract you to using the JI scales, right?
Yeah.
Well, what got you started on this whole microtonal music path in the first place?
Oh, well, I owe everything to Craig Grady and Terumi Narashima.
Okay.
So it's kind of funny. Wollongong is like a little microtonal hub. I'll explain Wollongong first. So for you guys, so Wollongong is about an hour and a half south of Sydney. It has a pretty small population. It's a little town, but a university there, and it's somehow found itself the home of many microtonalists. I don't know why. A lot of people live there, including Craig and Terumi. But yeah, so Terumi is working at the university. She gave a brief lecture on microtonality, and it was the only lecture that she's allowed to have on microtonality. I don't know if it's the only lecture she's allowed to have, but she made it count. She had this big presentation, and she showed like a 12 ET keyboard, and then she said, but then I found out in between there's a whole spectrum, and then she replaced it with like a rainbow. It's like, it sounds a bit cheesy, but like it was enough to like make me go, whoa, oh my god, there's a whole world. Yeah. So and then after that, Craig came in with some of these homemade instruments. I forget exactly what tunings they were in, but he uses recurrent sequence scales quite a lot, so might have been one of those. But yeah, I had a play of that, and then like from that moment on, I was like, tell me more, I need more. Just kept hitting up Craig on Facebook, and he's just so passionate, has endless time, endless hours, and yeah, I just kept pestering him with all my funny scrolled lattices that made no sense, and he helped me make them make sense, and yeah, here I am.
Okay, cool. Well, aside from that, do you listen to much microtonal music?
Oh yeah. Well, I never did. See, I find microtonalists always have these like stories, like Irv, for instance, used to try and go on a piano and mimic the sound of the wind coming through a door, but he could never find the tones in the piano. This is something I read.
Yeah.
And other people talk about always being curious, but I was never curious, if I'm honest. I just didn't even know it existed. I was completely happily contented in the darkness of one tuning system. But yeah, when I heard about microtonal music, I just binged. I listened to basically you guys' music, stuff you guys had released, and Brendan Burns just constantly. And then when I started making guitars, when I found out I couldn't afford to buy them, I started making guitars. I just would sit there in my workshop blasting microtonal music, just feeling excited about what I was creating, and wanting to really just dig in. So yeah,
that's cool. I think it's quite necessary for people to have that period of immersion when they're getting into that stuff. It's one thing to have the idea of, oh yeah, there's a possibility there, but you have to actually enjoy that. You have to get the feeling for it as well. And I think the listening is what helps bring all that together.
Yeah.
Don't know if you guys agree, but
That's true with me for sure, because I know when I first started, I didn't know a lot, and I kind of look back now on like the first sort of era of my own microtonality and think like, if only I had known a little bit more about other tuning systems, I would have made X tuning system sound like Y instead. But I mean, I don't really care about it enough to like try and go back and revise history or anything. The listening really drew me in as well. It's cool that you make your own guitars. So how do you do that exactly? Because I think people have different solutions to that.
Yeah. I feel like I should clarify. I don't quite make guitars. Not like Ron does or anything. Or John Catler. Although does he make? I didn't even know.
He does.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I just refret. So basically, my entire process is incredibly crude. But I mostly make them for myself. So I essentially get. I'll show you guys.
Ooh, acoustic, huh?
Yeah. So it's all my guitars, because when I put out the call to people, I said, hey, I'm getting into some weird stuff with refretting. If you have any old guitars, please donate them. So I ended up with all these like really.
Oh, yay!
Yeah, a bunch of guitars of
quite a little collection.
Yeah, of varying quality. But yeah, so for instance, I just take out all the frets, and that's just a process of using some pliers. Professional luthiers do it differently, but I just sort of get them out.
Okay.
And then
Right. So what am I looking at here?
Oh, yeah.
This is a fretboard with all the frets pulled out, and cool.
yeah,
And is it smooth when you run your finger along the fretboard and there are no frets, or can you feel the little
it's-
like cracks where they used to be?
It's incredibly lumpy, so I usually get a bit of like putty and put that in, and then I get some sanding paper and go make it all nice and smooth. And then if I was going to keep it fretless, I'd get some lacquer and make it nice and smooth and slippery. But and then I go into Ekip's fret find and input whatever tuning I want to do, and then just cut the frets out and put them in and try and make them look pretty and feel nice on your finger.
Well, that's great. So with those frets that you put on, do you have to make new cracks in the wood, or do you just glue those directly onto the smoothed fretboard?
Oh no, I have a fret saw, and I just
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
yeah.
That's very cool. I think your guitars are a lot less scary than justly tuned guitars where you don't do things like a fifth chain away. You know how you mentioned that you tune your
Yeah.
strings, what is it, like D, A, D, G, A, D, I think?
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got the same fret pattern on each string, but there are those other justly tuned guitars where they don't want those little commas at all.
You mean
So-
like these ones?
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
So you've got one.
Yeah,
Or how many more do you have?
Just one, and it's the only one I'm ever going to do in my entire life, because it was the most difficult process ever.
Yeah, it seems
so,
like
like-
excruciating.
Oh,
Yeah.
It was hell. It was just so bad. And like I think it sounds cool, and the interesting thing is it looks like a total jumbled mess, right? But
Yeah, it does.
it's
So what we're looking at here is the fretboard with not incomplete frets, but partial frets scattered across.
yeah.
Crazy.
Right, so the fret doesn't make a straight line perpendicular to the fretboard. It
No.
will like break off on a certain string and then sort of reform there. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is like a 12-note JI scale I made in the key of G. I thought it would be really cool to have a guitar built for just one song. So I wrote a song in Maybe Pile, and then I was like, what if I made it JI? And then I went ahead and built this guitar, and then I decided not to use it because, it's just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel quite right to me. But I'm glad I did it. It's a cool little experiment.
Is it the uneven frets that make it hard to play?
Yeah, and honestly, like a bit of my craftsmanship, because I made this, I think it was my second or third guitar, so it's still got some really rough edges, and it doesn't feel that comfortable to play. But yeah,
I mean, I know you're talking about your guitars being crudely made, but you can't really tell when you actually listen to the final result. Like
Right.
one thing I've really noticed listening to music, there's this kind of wholeness. I don't know, kind of like all aspects of it were considered. You know, right down to some of them have got music videos, and they're well produced.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
quite sad that I have to say it, but in the microtonal scene, it's always really exciting when that comes along.
Yeah, it is.
yeah. But that's all part and parcel, really, because I love listening to like that. That's the thing that's so important about the community is thinking like finding a tuning and being like, whoa, what the hell does this sound like? And then someone's like, here's what the hell it sounds like. and even if it's not like amazing quality, it's nice to hear like a little, just a little demonstration, I guess. But yeah, you're right. It totally is. It is important to have good production, especially if you're, showing other people what this can sound like. You want to have it be strong. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
absolutely.
It's like fine for us guys to listen to all the demos, and I love all the demos too, with all the MIDI sounds and all of that. It's and when you're listening to that, you have to divorce the kind of experience side of the music from the idea of the tuning. So in the past I made the mistake with my friends of like, oh yeah, listen to this. Listen to the tuning. It sounds really cool, and I just say it sounds rubbish because it's a tuning demo.
Yeah.
Right, because they don't care about the tuning, really. Yeah.
They hear this as one whole thing, which is why it's impressive when the microtones are included in a project that is a whole thing. Not that I want to criticize the tuning demos.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they have a place. But probably in the hands of the public isn't one of them. Maybe.
Right.
I don't know. Was that too absolute? I don't want to be too absolute here.
That wasn't as absolute as what I was going to say, but I forgot.
Go on, say it. Lay down the edge.
Lay down the edge? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I think about the demos. Like you guys, I think that they're just great, but, I guess I don't want a lot of people to hear them because they'll make unfair assumptions.
True.
But I also don't feel like properly qualified to gauge someone's level of open-mindedness. Although, like, playing something xenharmonic that sounds pretty decent is a really good litmus test for, like, someone's ability to hear something new, unless it's not very xenharmonic. It's interesting that you can also have music that uses different tuning systems that doesn't sound radically different from 12. I have that experience with a lot of music that's in just intonation. If it's very modal or very tonal and based in a pitch center. Yeah. So, I mean, do you ever think about that when you're writing your music?
But like perception, other people's perception.
Yeah, like, are you ever thinking about like how it sounds really different from 12, or are you trying to make the microtonal scales sort of sound like 12, or do you have various approaches with that?
I do. It is changing pretty rapidly though, because when I first began, the first song I ever wrote on the guitar was "Let's Go" in that video, and it's just 2 chords.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it's just 2 chords, and both of them are dominant 7th chords or harmonic 7th chords.
Learn lots of names. My name is Jack Tickner, and this is my brand new song. Let's go.
And that was just me going like, oh my God, I've never heard a 7th like this. And then like, oh, there's another one, like cool. And then like, I just play them over and over. And then I was like, yeah, it's a song. But yeah, but now I pick it up and I'm a bit more discerning and a bit more, I don't know. I want to use 11 limit stuff more often now. Because I find like when you're doing 7 limit things, like, musicians can generally tell. They'll be like, whoa, that's different. But the general public, not so much. But when you're doing 11 limit stuff, that's like when most people can tell. Most people will be like, because the idea of like a sharp 11 chord and the sharp 11 is almost a quarter tone flat. That's the thing that most people notice. And usually for the better, they notice it, and then it's like, yeah. That chord, when I first heard it, that was what really sold me on microtonality. That was what really did it when I heard the first 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 11 chord. I was like, I literally just sat there like, oh my God, this is a game changer.
I love that chord, man. I think Brendan Burns uses that quite a lot in his 22 Edo pieces, right?
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, he definitely rubbed off on me a little bit.
Nice. Yeah, well, your music sounds totally different to his.
Yeah.
But, both great. I'm so glad that both of you exist, because now I get to listen to the music. You mentioned Let's Go.
I love the music video for that song. That's just so great.
Thank you.
Well, then Bug as well. That recent one you did, Bug. Every time I watch that, man, I just crease up laughing. It's just so good.
Thank you.
It's bizarre. I always begin watching that video sober, and I end in a totally different place. It's just totally spins me out. So yeah, anyone listening, go and search for Jack Tickner Bug. It's great.
Thank you.
So I've got another question for you, Jack, about when you are writing on guitar, what are the smallest step sizes you tend to use? Because I know in Let's Go, I hear the little like hey hey part, and it seems like that's microtonal, but it's also a large enough step that somebody who's never heard quarter tones can be okay with it, or they could like mistake it for something that doesn't sound like a quarter tone. And I even quote it in this silly song. Jack made a just intonation scale once and sent it to me, and I was like, I'm gonna make this really bizarre country song that will scare my family. Holy water of the ponded don't work. First skip stick man's laws out of your eyes. The power of future sight, it ain't right. And so I quote it at the end of the song in like a little 7-limit thing. But yeah, how do you feel about using small steps? The reason I was thinking of this question was because on your guitars, you were talking about how you have the commas because the frets are the same on each string. So I was wondering if you used that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to call them commas before, but I was uncertain if that's what they were. I'm still
maybe they are, maybe they aren't.
I'm still pretty new to this stuff. But yeah, I use really tiny intervals sometimes. The smallest like fretted interval is a 23 cent interval on my 22 tone guitar.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
is that really hard to nail? Is that a narrow, really narrow fret?
It's okay in the first octave, but then when it goes up to the higher octave, it's like twice as small. So
yeah.
So yeah, I can't really shred around that. Although lots of people can. There's a billion videos of Ron Sword on the internet shredding really, really fast, tiny intervals.
Crazy.
But yeah, I like to use really small intervals. It's funny, you mentioned Let's Go in that section. That I actually had the microtonal police called on me when that first came out.
You did? Please do tell.
I had the insufficient Zen police, which is fine. Like I kind of expected it because it's sort of just a pop song, but yeah, that was like an interval of I think like 50 cents or so. Yeah, almost a quarter tone or something. But yeah, I quite like using that, and I like experimenting with I guess like traditional music composition stuff. And like you might have a triad, and then you'll treat the center note as the seventh of the next chord, and then you'll move each note apart a tiny bit, just like all like little stuff like that to like mess with your ear. And that's really where I feel quite excited exploring microtones is, yeah, just different ways I can mess with perception.
And it makes sense that you use just intonation a lot because of that system of part writing you're describing where you hold a note and then it becomes just intonation in another note. By the way, a brief explanation of the comma for our listeners. If you're in just intonation and you traverse a certain number of in-tune intervals, it can land very, very close to another simple interval that's in tune. So then the difference between those two intervals is called a comma. Of course, you can imagine that since numbers are used, the comma is kind of a subjective thing. But that's why guitars with like uneven frets exist, because then they don't have any commas, at least not any commas that are outside the scale. So Jack's guitars will have more commas because of the frets being straight across the fretboard.
Yeah, and that was Craig's suggestion to do that.
Good idea.
Yeah, and it's been far. I don't know. I have made one 22 EDO guitar so far, and that was lots of fun. And I would like to experiment more with that in the future. But for now, I'm really digging JI.
Yeah,
fair enough.
You could you could cover Brendan Burns songs on the 22 EDO guitar.
That's true. Yeah, I don't really hear I hear microtonalists covering non-microtonal songs, but I don't really hear microtonalists covering microtonal songs.
I do that.
Do you?
I've covered all of Elaine Walker's Drum in Space, and
Oh,
I have
right.
a lot on my list. Like, I want to cover
Cool.
like my Zarian Porcupine Overture and make some really bad words, like put them in and make it really cheesy. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I know how to play it. I've got the 15 equal keyboard right here. I don't know if you've seen it. Can you see it? No, not quite.
Yeah, now I can see it. Whoa, cool.
Darn, I had another question for you about guitar, but it's sort of vanished out of my head.
That's okay.
I don't know if you have a question, Sevish.
No, I don't. We could just talk about anything you want, really.
Oh, sure. Actually, I remembered my silly question. I just was going to lightly muse that it was interesting that lots of Westerners don't think that a harmonic seventh chord sounds xenharmonic because of things like barbershop and because lots of music will cheat. And if there are non-fixed pitch instruments, people will just sort of, snap right into it. Usually. Sometimes not. I don't think they perceive the difference between the minor seventh and the harmonic seventh as being large enough to warrant it as a different note. So I think most people consider it a different flavor of the same note. So that's just, that's kind of what Let's Go reminded me of. I was like, I can kind of tell this is a little xenharmonic, but then I'm not sure that other people would. So that's kind of an interesting line that you go with there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, like I immediately heard when I heard a harmonic seventh, I immediately was like, "Whoa, this is a beautiful sound," because it's the first time I'd heard a seventh chord that sounded rested, and it didn't sound like it wanted to jump to a one. Didn't sound like a fifth chord in it was totally seated on its own. It's a beautiful thing, but I find oftentimes when I'm talking to people about microtones, they're rightfully, I don't know, because I avoided it for a while as well, that they're rightfully a little bit, a little bit...
Well, they're like skeptical or...
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, they're generally like a bit skeptical or like a bit, like there's a lot of pride on the line. This is probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Is like...
Especially if you spent so long learning all of the 12 Edo the 12 Edo system, you could take years and years and years learning that. And people have great pride in that. And then to be told, oh, well, that's just a drop in the ocean, can hurt egos. But it's true, though.
It's so frightening. And like, I really feel... I understand why they might say that. Actually, the first time... I remember very clearly the first time I finished my first microtonal guitar, strung it up, and I sat down with it. And that moment was the culmination of 6 months of playing with Scala's annoying MIDI sounds. just being like, one day I'll have my own guitar. And it was all this time of drawing up lattices and like listening to everyone in the community, like all of their music, and just hungering so much. And then when I finally sat down with a working 22-tone JI guitar, and I just froze up. I had complete option paralysis because there was this thing I was pining for so long. And then when I finally got it, it was such a moment of, I guess, fear, because it's like, well, now I'm here. How do I even begin to unpack what the hell I'm meant to do and my place in it? So I'm still figuring that out, to be honest. As I really enjoy making, I guess, like, quirky pop music, as much as I want to do some really serious composition, especially with those higher note tuning systems. It's just, like, I don't know how you did, 313 equal temperament, Sevish? What was it?
Oh, yeah, it was. I think we discussed this a couple of episodes ago, actually.
Yeah.
Because I'm only using a subset, I'm only using 9 of those. So 313 is the tuning of the 9 notes that I've used. However, I don't have access to the entire thing. Otherwise, I would actually be insane. I'm like half insane, but not that much.
Yeah.
That's so funny. It's good marketing, though, if you put 300... in 13, people are like, oh my god.
Oh, totally.
But yeah, you know what though? It does trigger people sometimes. You get people that say, oh, but if you're going that high, then it just all sounds the same. And the limits of perception are you can't really hear any difference between any lower than 2 cents, although that's a lie. You can hear much far below that.
Yeah, and you
fraction
can
of a cent.
and you
But
can.
What do you guys know what you can actually hear? Like, what is the smallest? Because I thought it was 2 cents.
Well, see, I don't know any numbers, but it really depends on how you're hearing those notes. For example, if they're played melodically, one after the other, then you may not hear that difference at 2 cents. Although I've done kind of experiments on myself, and I can hear about 1 cent. However, if you then go play 2 notes at the same time, you can tell if they're exactly in tune or not because of the beating. So that's where perception actually you can actually hear fractions of a cent, 0.1 or 0.05 of a cent, because you'll hear those beats.
Yeah.
I have tested myself extensively as a performer, and what you are describing with the 1 cent thing is something that I can do as well. Although with lower pitches, it doesn't really work, I don't think.
Oh, no.
Somewhere below like 100 hertz. But I would call those laboratory conditions or
Yes,
slow tempo conditions.
exactly. Yeah.
I love how you adjusted your glasses when you said that.
Thank you. They've been...
That was very
exactly.
It's very academic
Yeah,
of
if
you.
you don't do the glasses adjustment, it doesn't have the proper authority.
I don't even feel like a proper microtonalist right now.
You gotta
Where
put your
are my
glasses on.
Yeah, I didn't have any.
Sunglasses?
I think that the smallest difference I hear in performance is something like 15 cents, where
Yeah.
if I'm holding a note, really, my voice is wobbling within sort of a 15 cent like band, or probably even more. You can land on a note a quarter tone off, and if your music has the right timbre and the right speed, nobody will notice. Probably not even
exactly,
a microtonalist, really, although sometimes I notice. I notice in situations where I am hearing it and I know the pitch is higher, but it doesn't sound bad. So it's not like a giveaway, like where Sevish was talking about 2 notes 1 cent apart being held very steady. You hear that like beating. Like that's a really obvious thing, but then there's a bunch of music where that phenomenon is not obvious at all. So people can land on notes that, if they're close enough, they'll count. It's just that if you go the wrong way, it will not work. So like, for example, if you land on a leading tone really low, that's a lot worse than landing on it really high. That's a good example.
Sorry, forgive my ignorance. What do you mean by leading tone?
Oh, I mean, in the diatonic scale, how scale degree 7 resolves to 1. So Tito, 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 Tito. Nonsense like that. You can get those leading tones really small before people get mad. Like, I think you can get them past 70 cents, probably like 60 or 50. I've heard people sing quarter tones as leading tones before, and it's not too upsetting.
Yeah. Those very small leading tones are quite dramatic, I think, in their quality. At least that's my subjective experience of them.
Exactly. Yeah.
If they get too tiny, it just sounds like an out of tune octave, obviously. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I find whenever I'm trying to sing microtones, I say trying because I unintentionally sing them constantly. When I'm trying to sing microtones, I like to use Ableton as a help.
Learning
I
by
guess.
rote, right? You're just copying what you hear. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
yeah. Well, and then I can like isolate a small amount and just do a very brutalized version of auto tune on myself.
Yeah.
Like sharpen myself or flatten myself a little bit. But for the most part, I don't really tune to a scale when I'm singing along with microtonal music. I just tune to my ear.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Well, that works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We could always set these limitations, like, oh yeah, I want to write this piece of music that uses only these pitches. But you could just take that as a starting point and then do some stuff over the top of it. It's kind of I think that's the approach you're taking. It's kind of what I do as well a lot of the time.
Yeah. Well, when you guys were talking to Zia, Elaine Walker, you talked briefly about the Boll and Pierce scale and how you'll just the octave below doesn't exist.
Right, yeah.
I remember you saying treasure your octaves. I absolutely agree. Treasure your octaves. So you sort of just fake it by getting the normal note and then pitching it down an octave or whatever you have to do. Like I think purism only takes you so far, and I think pragmatism is the way to go.
Oh yeah, you can absolutely miss notes in xenharmonics by a huge amount, and they can still give the impression of being xenharmonic. And I think your ear is always the best subjective judge.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that go into that aren't just about the tuning. For example, I have this song in 23 tone equal temperament called Curiosity Finds a Frown. So it uses an 11 note scale, 6 large, 5 small, and then it modulates to the other one that's in the crack so that it uses 22 notes. And then the 23rd note is a chromatic note somewhere else in there. Huh. So it does use all 23 notes.
Cool.
But I remember I looked at that in pitch correction and it was off, but it sounded like it was on with the note material. So there are lots of situations where your ear makes a decision that sounds more satisfying to you than what the technical correct value is.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful that you're not just preferring 12 EDO. And I think that like singing more xenharmonic songs over the last 3 years has given me a better appreciation for knowing when something sounds xenharmonic and like really finding pockets of things I like, even if they aren't right on within a 15-cent area. If they're a little bit more, it's totally fine. Like in 15 EDO, whenever I play C to G, it's that 720-cent fifth. My perfect pitch is always really rattled by that because I will always hear C in my head as being too low from where it should be, and then that high G in 15 EDO sounds like a G sharp to me, even though the regular C sounds like a C. So it's just perfect for training me. Yeah.
I didn't know you had perfect pitch.
Yeah, I do. Well, it's been
interesting.
debated whether I actually have it, because I posted a video about how I learned perfect pitch when I was 14, but some people think it's extended pitch memory, which is possible. I'm not sure about the semantics.
Is that not the same thing?
No, although it seems a little bit unfalsifiable and stupid, because if you cannot tell the difference between two things, why give them different names? Like I am indistinguishable from someone with true perfect pitch just because they learned it earlier.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah. Can I ask you a random question?
Yes, you can. We can always talk about perfect pitch.
Okay, cool. Were you blind as a child?
No.
Or like as a young? Okay, because I'm reading an Oliver Sacks book.
Oh man, I love that guy.
Yeah. It's called Musicophilia, and one of the things he said was 40% of children who experience blindness go on to have absolute pitch.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah, interesting phenomena. It reminds you of that superhero who's blind and all of his other senses get expanded.
That's cool. Yeah, I've also heard people who speak tonal languages are much more likely to acquire perfect pitch as well. So people who speak things like Mandarin, where the register of their voice plays a part in the meaning, even if they're making the same sound. So that's pretty cool too.
Bit of Mandarin. I'm kind of skeptical of that one. I don't know. Yeah, it could be. It makes sense if the language has some element of perfect pitch in it itself. I don't think Mandarin does. It's more about the contour of the intonation than the actual things themselves. Yeah. Otherwise, say like children and grown men would be mutually incomprehensible. It could be. There's something in there. There's something in there, but I don't know, man.
I think Oliver Sacks like hypothesized that, but he didn't substantiate it. He just said, "This is a thing I think might be true."
When was the book written? The one that you're reading?
Musicophilia. I think it was 2007.
Oh wow, that's recent.
It's a good book as well. So if you haven't read that,
I haven't read that.
Good.
I definitely need to do that.
Because we're involved in some kind of weird music obsession with tuning. We get into these weird psychoacoustic effects. So that book has the occasional little gem of information in there about how the mind or the brain really when certain things happen in it, the perceived effects in the mind are really very odd.
And people are always obsessed with perfect pitch too. And I have to admit it is pretty great for certain occasions, and I don't feel discomfort about microtonality, but it was so confusing to my brain initially because I remember playing in 19 EDO at Ball State. It was like one of the first EDOs I played with, and just like playing both G and G flat and thinking they both sounded like G's. And so I was like, well, okay, I'm going to work with that some more. You know, I like to think of perfect pitch as a microcosm of register. That is, in Mandarin, you have little registers, and those are sort of zones. And so if you get better at figuring out where those zones are, you figure out, you know, right where a certain place is. I guess I wonder how accurate perfect pitch can be when we're calling notes, because that's a different question than finding the just noticeable difference between two notes or things like that. I'd say I can be at least accurate within a quarter tone on a bad day, and then on a good day, it's at least 30 cents probably. But
Cool.
you know, I can never get it like, you know, there's some days where you can't really just like nail it because a lot of things can go wrong. I always wonder, like, with someone who doesn't have perfect pitch, if you were to play a song in the wrong key, maybe it's like a major second down, how much lower would it have to be before they know that it's in the wrong key? There are lots of like other subtle cues that tell you that something's in the incorrect key that are not just perfect pitch related.
Yeah. Well, for myself, I sort of just play it in the wrong key merrily.
It's a good idea.
I don't really mind. I used to use that song "Welcome to the Black Parade" by My Chemical Romance.
Oh, that one.
as my like center of like what I think it's a G. It starts with. It's like da 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 da.
You got it.
Da.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh,
you beat me
that's right.
to it. So you have perfect pitch too or something. Or maybe you have good pitch memory and it's not really called perfect pitch.
Maybe I just love My Chemical Romance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think good what's it called? Not absolute pitch, the relative pitch. Good relative pitch can be good. I do like absolute pitch though. The bassist in my band has it. Plays in a band I'm in called Wollongong, named after the town.
It's a great name.
Yeah, his perfect pitch is so accurate, but he doesn't really show any disposition towards a certain tuning system. When I've showed him microtones, he's just like, yeah, cool, I like this.
I wish more people said that instead of, why would you do something new and interesting with your life if it requires work?
Yeah. You do quite. Sometimes you can get extreme reactions out of people who have perfect pitch and come across microtones, and it's kind of amusing.
I've never actually seen that in real life. I always hear about it though. I mean, I do feel like people with perfect pitch, they get annoyed more often if like you're singing in choir and the whole choir's like, we're tired today, and they're just going down, down, down. They'll never get below a major second, but you know. Yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, that doesn't actually annoy me. It's a good challenge. Interesting flavor, stuff like that. But there are people with perfect pitch who are kind of annoyed by that. And I say they don't understand what performance is about. But...
Well, it's funny you bring that up because that's... like I don't know if there's any credence to this, but I've always thought... Like, I've been... Oh, sorry, let's be 1 second to illustrate.
Okay, there's your 1 second. Ooh.
I'm going to edit out all the rest of the stuff so it actually is 1 second.
I love the bashing noises as I get a guitar. Yeah, I've always thought, right, so this is my 22-tone scale on an acoustic.
That is a beauty. Oh my goodness. Sounds like D flat major. Maybe, no, it's in between. It's in between C and D flat.
Yeah, probably. I've often thought, right, so this is the difference between, this is like a 3/15 cent minor third.
Yes.
And then this is the 7/6 minor third.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah, and it's always been the thing that's excited me so much about microtones is I guess like if I imagine two people singing and like it's like you're sad and then like you're really sad.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's the thing I've loved so much is like the idea that the other person, if they're like even more grave and like full of despair, they're like just sharpen naturally. Or like, you know, like likewise if you're playing a major third and then like if you're really like a bit excited or happy, like pushing that major third till it's like
There it is. Ooh.
yeah. Although that's probably more of a functionally more of a perfect fourth, I guess. I don't know actually.
That sounds more major third like to me. It doesn't even sound like it's
you're right.
super major 30 really. It just sounds like a big major third.
Yeah, it almost makes the normal major third sound like a minor third. Does anyone else get that?
Yes, that was one
Yeah,
of the
I've had
first
that.
things I
Yeah.
noticed when I started playing around with
Yeah.
thirds, because if you use like sine waves on a computer, I would do this to my pitch perception class when I was at Ball State, or it was a human perception, not really pitch perception, but that was part of it. I would just, have a bunch of different thirds lined up in sine waves and play some of them in a row, and it was very easy to trick people into hearing minor thirds as major and vice versa.
That's when most people, well, not most people, a lot of people will just move away.
Right, yeah.
Move away from the voodoo magic.
Yeah, I think a lot of people realize that, like, if somebody plays microtonality for them and they're bamboozled, they're just like, well, this is stupid. Nobody could do this. But really, the proper response is, no, this happens to microtonalists too. It's easy to bamboozle anybody because there are a lot of ways to trick the ear. And, I mean, that's part of what I'm interested in as a microtonalist is getting things to sound like other things.
Interesting.
Yeah, like the minor third that you were playing, you had, say, the 3 out of 15 minor thirds, like 3/20 cents and then a septimal minor third. Those two intervals for me, I will often mistake them for each other. They're very fluid categorically, but I find that with major thirds I'm a lot more sensitive, and it's a lot easier for me to pick out a major third that's higher than it should be than a minor third that's lower than it should be. So we all have those little subjective points with dyads and triads and things like that.
Yeah.
I actually heard a really cool xenharmonic piece at Ball State's latest electronic music concert. I actually performed a song in 53 EDO there with a bunch of squares. Not very xenharmonic, but pretty cool. I used it because, you get basically just major and minor chords, and that's what I wanted. So this piece that was played at the beginning, it was like Inharmonic Fantasy No. 2 by Hubert Howe. He teaches somewhere, I think, on the East Coast. Maybe he'll listen to this eventually, I don't know. I met him at some other conference, and man, it was just so, like, crazy with, like, how the sidebands were interacting. You know how you get periodic sounds that are really, like, robotic and computerized, and sometimes you can get really crazy extra pitches that you're not knowing if you're supposed to get them or not. This piece was just so full of that. It was absolutely mesmerizing. And I know that people who never care about that probably listen to it and were like, oh no, it's boring, because it's all about pitch. But yeah, no, the rhythms were cool too, and the entrances, and using the space to, like, sort of get pitches to interact with each other across speakers, because I definitely hear pitches differently in my ears. Like, if two speakers are playing, if two speakers are playing and there's a constant pitch and it's like, ba, I'll just, like, turn my head and it'll go, ba, and it's just really slight, but it's there. It's like the Aphex Twin thing. So.
Yeah. Oh, I wish the listeners could have seen your head as you were doing that. Sort of like a carnival clown of sorts.
Definitely.
Microtonal carnival
Maybe
clown.
someday. We'll go live on YouTube and all our fans will be there. We'll figure out we have like 2 fans.
Yeah, it's just us.
It's just us.
It's just us. Re-listening.
Yeah.
I've never spoken about this before, but it's a thing I've always noticed. When I yawn when I'm listening to music, I can feel the pitch of the music change and expand as I yawn.
Yes.
Have you guys ever had that before?
Every time.
I haven't noticed that, man. I must not be sensitive enough.
Interesting.
Oh, it's like, I don't know, maybe we just have weird ears that move strangely.
I mean, no, it's normal to hear pitch differently in both ears. it would be weird for a human to hear them the same in both ears. At least according to the stuff I know about perception and like just how the ear is constructed and what goes into it. So it's pretty interesting stuff, like how pitch is perceived and all of that, and how the ear does a time analysis on the whole thing, and it's just crazy.
Yeah. So speaking of crazy perceptions, so Craig Grady's band Clocks and Clouds, they use really interesting scales that I haven't really heard the microtonal community use much of.
Really?
But yeah. Are you familiar with recurrent sequence scales?
Absolutely. I've written a lot about the mathematics of it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I find that watching them, like Terumi warned me about it, and I watched these videos online of Craig playing his instruments, and there's someone there with their hands in their ears, just like doing that, and I'm thinking like, what the hell? It's just like a maroon, they're just vibes, right? He's just playing
what
vibes.
a baby.
But then when I watched it live,
Holy crap.
but then when I watched it live, I was like, okay, I could see how that could happen, because the way that like the notes sound together, there's like the vibrations are just so flooring, and it's almost the main feature of the tuning, I'd say, is it's not so much the tones you hear, but the way they interact.
Yes.
It's super, super interesting. It's always such an interesting sonic experience watching them play live. Somehow it can feel like you're hearing them not through your ears, but behind your head.
Yes, absolutely.
I have no idea why or how, or the science behind the acoustic phenomena, but yeah, it sounds like all sorts of crazy things happen. It's really incredible.
That's amazing that he was able to do that with live instruments, because it's a lot harder with live instruments than with electronic means, like speakers all around or even speakers in front of you.
Yeah.
So, and it's another feature of microtonal tunings or xenharmonic tunings that you do not get in 12 nearly enough of. Like, there are a lot of things that are just, musical and in the world that if you only use 12, you miss out on, like, really badly. And that's one of them, like the ways that tones interact and how you can draw that out. That's something I haven't done myself, but I'm very interested in it for the future. That's a cool concert, yeah.
Yeah. I want to show you guys. This is a nice follow-on. Show you guys. So this guitar is another interesting fretting. It's tuned to Irv Wilson's Metapalog scale. It uses, I think it's a fifth of 686 cents, or maybe even a bit lower. I forget.
Wow.
I did a big presentation on it in 2017 when I was first getting into microtones. And yeah, so you should see that it's a 9-tone scale, but the extra frets next to it, they are 8 hertz sharp of the original notes, or 8 hertz, 8 hertz sharp. So you can see that this is the open, and so on. And I've tuned these strings here to be the same notes. So then when you play, you get things like
So detuning.
You can't really hear it so well. Yeah, essentially. Because it's a thing I studied a bit in Balinese music. They have a concept called ombak, which is central to their tuning. It literally translates from Bahasa Indonesian to waves. So they might have 2 instruments tuned to a scale, except one will be sharpened by usually between like 3 to 8 hertz. So when they play together, the notes vibrate out. And it's been hypothesized that the reason they do that is because of where they perform the music. Because it's generally outdoors, the sound carries a bit further when it has that those like destructive frequencies bouncing off one another.
Oh yeah, that's smart.
So yeah. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't nearly sound the same, and there's all these like beautiful timbral things that go on in Balinese music that add to the scale. But on a guitar, it's really fun because you apply a bit of distortion and it just soars. It just goes. Yeah,
That's awesome.
That is so cool. I haven't digged into this stuff nearly enough as I should do. It's interesting you say that the differences are 8 hertz.
I was about to mention
which is obviously because it's a linear measurement of pitch, really, isn't it? Hertz, compared to the sense that we've been talking about before. So mixing the two, you can see how there's a general schema of this is the Palog scale, but these other things that are added in are for some kind of psychoacoustic effect. That kind of linear change. I guess that's for the beating, the interference kind of. You're gonna get an 8 hertz beating from that, aren't you?
Yeah, so I couldn't believe it when I found it out. But when I was talking to Rumi, when I was doing that subject, I said, what's the deal with hertz? Like, I don't really get it. And she's like, well, think of it this way. It's really simple. If you have a pitch at 440 and then a pitch at 448, you're going to hear 8 vibrations a second. It's that simple.
It's crazy, yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I just went on and I went into Scala and tried to make the file with the 8 hertz sharp, and then I tried to use cents, but then I realized that cents don't apply. Like 30 cents up here might be 10 cents down there as a 8 hertz difference, or other way around, I think. Yeah, other way around, because it's like as you go higher, the hertz get.
Oh no, you were right before. It would be 30 cents higher for the same hertz distance as 10 cents below in the thing.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So that means that with your guitar, you have the small frets. Which string is it that does the 8 hertz thing? Because the other ones would have to do slightly different distances, right?
All right, yeah. The strings would have to be tuned to a specific frequency, right?
Well, some of them are octaves. So if they're just like the Ds.
Well, actually, they're not octaves. They're just unison.
Oh, every single.
Yeah, so that's. So it's like this is a unison, and this is a unison, and then these two I use for just I guess like bass notes in it. So you get things like
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Like it's this guitar a friend of mine gave me it, and it's not perfect. Like the intonation's a little bit off, but it does the job. I've been using it for quite a while now.
So you're not the type of person to fuss about whether the hertz vibrated 5 times per second instead of 8. That's good.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that makes me a pushover. I don't know. I'm pretty contented just to. I guess I haven't really had a chance to be a purist, if that makes any sense.
No, that's good.
It's overrated.
Because I've just been working with like my own tools and like humble stuff I bought from the internet. I don't really know. Yeah, I don't have any formal training on how to do luthier stuff. I just have YouTube and a lot of time on my hands.
That's all you need, really, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I just want to go back to that scale you were playing then. Something that strikes me as really, really interesting is that it's kind of like a chorus that's built into the tuning itself, right? And I find that equal tempered scales all have this chorus effect because none of the notes are perfectly tuned, so everything's kind of beating somewhat haphazardly against everything else. I mean, the example you played, the beating is, well, depending on how good the intonation of the guitar was, the beating should be around 8 hertz. But we compare that to something like just intonation, you get very, very... you're trying to avoid that beating altogether. And particularly when using digital instruments, digital oscillators, the beating is at 0, and it can be quite disorienting. Really, really disorienting.
Yeah. To hear no beating, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Well, not only that, but if you play that in stereo, not on headphones, but speakers in a room, you then have the interactions of the kind of the modal frequencies of that room. And as you move about the space, especially you've got a distance between both of your ears, so this is happening in different ways in different ears, but the position of your ear in space, you're gonna hit nodes where there's no sound there.
Yeah.
Where at that point there's, and you get that in just intonation because all of the sounds are static. It's baked into the tuning itself that there is no beating. This is totally lost if you're listening in 12 Edo. You move your head in the space, it kind of sounds the same because everything's kind of blurry and chorusy anyway. With just intonation, you get those disorienting effects when you're moving around.
I found that with JI, there's definitely those beating opportunities in built into places, kind of like the higher you go. But the thing I really love about it is like having that capacity for producing a dissonant interval and then making it make sense. Like like that's like a really sharp
super major third?
Major third. Yeah. And then this is a good chord below it. I think it's a bit. There's your brow.
I've done that exact same thing with the super major third before, where if it sounds dissonant on its own, you make it, like a 9/7 interval, and then your bottom note becomes a 7/4 of a root note that you then play under it. That's what you did, right? Yeah.
That's exactly what I did.
That's
And I find it's the most the most interesting example of, I guess, using lower note ratios to justify and make sense out of that stuff.
This kind of ties into what you were saying earlier on about the thirds, because the sub minor third can sound great and can sound like a minor third. It also sounds great in the context of a triad.
Yeah.
The super major third, I don't know if this is your guys' experience as well, but it doesn't sound good as a triad. It sounds absolutely awful. That's why you have to bring in that four. Or, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. But yeah, like all of these, even those dissonances, it's so important to know, because you can grab at that and you can make little I guess you can know when to dip into dissonance and when to opt out into something a bit more consonant.
Yeah.
Well, it's another way to create drama in your music, really, because you should be guiding people through, kind of like walking them down a path, and suddenly there's something disgusting on the path, but on closer inspection, it's this other, you've justified it by adding more notes in, and then you can kind of get a feel. Yeah,
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it just makes listening to music interesting when those kind of things are used. So it's so cool that you have that in your mind when you're using these weird scales.
Yeah, it's important. Hey,
I also think dissonance is really good for surprise, and I've been wanting to write a piece for a while where the dissonance gets to a certain point that sounds like it's from the common practice period, but then sort of resolves into something that's much, much more dissonant, and then the dissonant moments become comparatively more consonant moments.
Right.
Seems like it would lend itself to a simple form.
Yeah.
So there's probably a lot of people who won't like that, but I don't really care because I've always wanted to hear it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Who cares what people like to hear?
Yeah.
If we let that dictate what we did, we wouldn't be here having this conversation. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny though, on the dissonance thing. I once made a post in the Xenharmonic Alliance about metal and hardcore and microtones, and I was like, guys, it's just too easy, isn't it? Like, it's too easy just to sound like dissonant. And I said, like, I asked the question, how do other people who produce dissonant music decide which dissonance is the better dissonance to use? And no one really had an answer. They all just told me that dissonance shouldn't be the main goal of it. But I don't know, it is interesting.
I didn't see that post. Yeah.
They just like consonants, really. They just want everything to be tuned to 5-limit JI.
Yeah.
I hope not.
Yeah.
These guys.
Probably not. Yeah, those damn guys.
Sorry, I couldn't just get through another episode without having to mention 5-limit JI again. Oh, I love it.
Every episode. It's actually the best tuning system. That's why we keep mentioning it.
Well, I heard a Terry Riley piece in 5-limit JI, and that was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Terry Riley's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's really good.
yeah.
love it.
But I don't really know anyone else who uses 5-limit JI.
Harry Parch, Lou Harrison. I'm trying to think of someone else because I know that people do that with choir a lot.
Maybe Wendy Carlos as well.
Absolutely. Although she had the Wendy Carlos scales, which I think some of them are approximations and they're very close. But I guess it depends on what you consider to be close enough. I mean, 53 EDO is a good template for 5-limit JI without any higher limits, usually. And 72 EDO can also pass. You can even have situations where in 12 EDO, people are making small adjustments for better blend. And so they really sound like 5-limit JI, although perhaps it's not even really that, and the pitches themselves are higher or lower, and subtle timbre differences are giving the impression of JI. So, I mean, a JI purist can easily be fooled by that. So there's all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Well, I guess if you're a JI purist, then you have to exclusively listen to digital renderings of work just to make sure that the harmonics are perfectly aligned.
oh my.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. It all goes back to what we were saying earlier about a tuning giving us an impression of a certain character, but then that character deviates slightly from reality in some way because of our subjective pitch perception. So that's just a very interesting thing to me. I love tricking people's ears, including my own. If I listen to a piece that I've written over and over and my ear is still tricked by a certain chord progression, then it almost never happens really, but because I can internalize anything after a while.
Yeah.
As long as it's not too precise or like ridiculously precise.
Yeah. I really like in like just on that. I like in microtonal music hearing like I don't know about you guys, but for me it's almost like a floating feeling. I guess like a good example is in your song Gleam, Sevish. It's like it's in 22 and there's that bit where it's just like it's like a descending section. It's like and there's like it's like, whoa, where the hell am I? I've lost all the bearing of reality. I think that's one of the reasons I was like, man, 22 is a good number.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so it can sound so square, but it's like it's sort of like the secret tuning in that like you can present it and people will be like, oh yeah, that sounds like music, and then you can just rip it all away.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like the best of both worlds, I think.
Yeah. I love 22. I think everybody should. If you don't, then you're probably wrong. The approach that I love taking to 22, I don't do it often enough. I actually was thinking about this recently, that I want to go back and do this again, which is what I did with Gleam, which is to trying to think of like kind of R&B-ish kind of progressions, something from 12 Edo, and then just projecting that onto the 22 tone kind of tuning. And then obviously because things don't match up quite very well, you get these you get the occasional quarter tone or tone and a half, and just filling those in with more chord tones. I don't know. That's the approach that I took with Gleam, and I love that stuff.
Yeah, because functionally you hear what sounds like your brain kind of quantizes it within like a 12 EDO framework. You hear that descending line, but then you end up in a totally different place that you don't expect, which is I guess is probably one of the biggest reasons why we do it, right? It's just like a whole new harmonic language.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's so many different languages to deal with. And the subversion of expectation is just so important in music in every way. And xenharmonics, I think, sort of has a really, really tight grip on that. And I don't think any other musical technique really brings that same kind of richness to the idea. So, yeah, at least that's why I use it. Although I have gotten used to quarter tones ending up in certain places or very small steps. It's like melodic stepwise passages I find are really easy for singing, and they put you in a different spot. That's one reason why I really like 15 EDO, because you can alternate between 2 and 1 step, and the results are just completely different. And yet you have major and minor triads. Crazy.
Yeah, that is one of the weirder ones, isn't it? 15.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I've never played much with it, but I think I want to experiment more. I want to try under 22 tone scales now, I think.
Yeah,
it's just more, I don't know. I feel like, especially with this, the 10 tone guitar, it's like forces me to be more athletic and jump a bit more around and explore. Because there's, one step is like what, 120 cents or something generally on this guitar.
So that's 10 tone equal temperament.
No, but it's close. It's the JI scale I sent you.
Oh, that one, yeah.
I think it's like 7 limit JI. Yeah.
It has some 7 limit and 13 limit in it, and perfect fifths.
Yeah.
It's a 3.
Yeah. Well, it's this one I think is it's like 7/4, and if I forget, isn't that embarrassing?
I forget too.
But yeah,
so many numbers.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of numbers, let me tell you. But yeah, it's tuned to Dad Gad as well, but I think this is in C sharp. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I'm using this in Basil's Kite currently. This was the sweaty rehearsal video thing you saw.
Yeah, I could definitely see the utility in having only 10 notes there, but of course it being JI, there being so much you can do. I mean, that's the nice thing about JI. You just play the song in a different key and you've got a whole different song.
Yeah.
Value for money.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Well, yeah, personally, I think that 22 notes is a good number to have for JI as well as EDO, because I feel like with the less notes you have in just intonation, the harder it is to get chords to be in tune. And I guess a lot of people want that, but then there are also musicians who want to experiment with the like wolves or the intervals that are technically not simple end limit intervals of any kind. So it's pretty interesting when you are able to sort of use both approaches. I guess the less notes you have, the easier it is to get in with those wolf notes, and then the more notes you have, the easier it is to discover lots of relationships that are in tune. So 22 seems like a good number where you could get a lot of in tune relationships. 10 seems a little bit hard. And then maybe if you have something over like, 35 notes, that's sort of getting to be like a lot to deal with. And of course, for guitar players, what do you think is the most notes that you would be comfortable with having on a guitar? Because I've asked other people this question, and it's interesting how it varies.
Well, for me, that answer depends on who makes the guitar. I think like I've seen someone like Ron do guitars with up to 46 tones an octave. Yeah. Look it up. It's crazy.
Preposterous.
46. It's like a super long scale guitar, which is important. Because
I don't know if I consider that cheating or not, making the actual guitar bigger so you can get more frets.
It's practically a mega lyra at that point.
Yeah.
Well, like I did the same with this because this is 10 tones and I didn't want to have to stretch really far. So I use a children's guitar. This is a Ibanez Micro. It's super light. And, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It means I can get around easier with less tones. But yeah, I guess for me, I would probably... I would love to try like 31. I would love to go that high. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I guess if I did it though, it would... I don't know how I'd go doing a 31 guitar.
That'd be tough.
Yeah.
It's a lot of frets, yeah.
It is a lot of frets. But if you know what you're doing, you can probably find a way to make it nice. Like I know Steven Taylor has one in 31. I think Ron Sword's, his first guitar he ever did was in 31. Yeah, it's just something I'm not really bold enough to do yet. But maybe one day.
It's fascinating. I saw a really great video of Stephen James Taylor playing his 31 tone guitar, and he was playing a diatonic progression, but he had really cool microtonal inflections that sounded very zen, that were sort of in between. So, yeah, maybe we can dub that in later or something. But I just thought that was great.
Is that the one called Transcendent Tonality?
I think it is, although that might apply to a lot of things that he's done. Not really sure.
Yeah, I think Transcendent Tonality is kind of his way of explaining microtonal music, including 12 into that as well. That basically explain it that there's a tuning dimension, and I think that's it. I think that kind of describes his approach, or that's my interpretation of the phrase anyway.
Yeah.
He also explains it as the sonic sky.
Yeah.
Like, for example, all the scales that Irv Wilson's made, and it's a beautiful analogy, although some people who, aren't very pitch-centered will find the analogy a little bit flawed, but, it gets the point across. It's like there's 3 floors, and, all the floors are like a music restaurant factory. So on the first floor is where everybody gets served, They get served with food, so their job is just to enjoy it. On the second floor, there are people who study, how to make the food and what goes into making it good with the ingredients that they already have, like the chefs. So these are like composers that stay in 12-tone equal temperament. And I would add stay within fairly traditional means of making music. That's my part that I tack on there. And then the third floor is microtonality and pitch perception and usage of space and like understanding how humans hear music and like looking out another sonic sky and seeing all those possibilities. Although in his version, it's just microtonality on the third floor, which,
Yeah.
good for getting the point.
There might be some bias there. This is kind of sounding like one of those memes where there's like levels.
Yeah.
And then at the level is like this lone wolf person that doesn't ever speak to anyone that listens to xenharmonics. That's usually what happens.
Totally. I also like it because it places us right at the top there.
Yeah.
It's just like as if people didn't think microtonalism had like smug pretentiousness. We've built this hypothetical restaurant where the dreamers are dreams. No, I do like that, and I don't want to undermine what we do. I think it's absolutely essential, and it's pretty thankless, and lots of people just don't care at all. The reasons why they don't care vary for like stuff we talked about, but sometimes it's just like it's not easily accessible. So
yeah, it's also not always obvious to tell when you're listening to a piece of music whether or not it's microtonal, and it doesn't always have to be.
And some people don't ask that question, so you have to sort of think about what it's like for them, although that's really hard for me to do because I kind of listen to music and I usually know what's going on and I'm trying to make sense of it in some way, but lots of people don't do that at all. So that's like really removed from my kind of listening experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think there is a lot of value in microtonal music that doesn't actually make it obvious that it's microtonal. For example, I grew up where 12-tone equal temperament is the tuning of life. And that's what everyone plays. But it's kind of nostalgic, and I listen to a bunch of pop music from the 90s, let's say, and I feel really good about that. And I might want to write something that kind of gives me a similar feeling, but I also want to just add just a little something to it. So I could choose a microtonal kind of mean tone temperament, let's say, for example, and I'd have access to that. And then for a lot of people, they wouldn't hear any different. Quite often I do that in my music, and then I'll put it online and someone will complain, yeah, but it doesn't sound any different to normal music, so what's the point anyway? No. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to do. You don't have to make everything xenharmonic, although it's nice. Xenharmonic stuff's very cool. But sometimes I just want to play something really, really familiar, but have it sound really in tune. Don't know if you guys agree.
I agree. Just to clarify, when we talk about the difference between like, microtonal and xenharmonic is like refers to like being noticeably very like beyond 5 limit tunings, right? Like,
well, it sounds very different to 12 though. It's the subjective element that it sounds recognizably alien, whereas microtonal music doesn't have to.
And it doesn't have to be beyond 5 limit tuning or any kind of JI at all. It just has to sound radically different, because you could use 5 limit JI and you could use relationships within 5 limit JI that have very, very bizarre step sizes compared to 12. So I think it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, how you were listening to Gleam and the quarter tones messed up where your 12 equal slots were. It's a lot of it is about that kind of feeling, but also about timbre and various other things. Derek himself would go on at length about the subjectivity of it. So it's definitely different from person to person, but certain tunings will definitely be more xenharmonic than others on a first listening. Like 13, 14, and 15 tone equal temperament are all like crazy zen, especially the first time you hear them. So
yeah. If I can go on a bit more about the definition of xenharmonic,
please do.
It kind of feels to me. No, this is just purely my opinion though. It kind of feels to me like we could make it a bit more useful by making it not about sounding different to 12, but about sounding non-traditional. Because like I appreciate all the traditional music. Let's just say from Turkey or where they're using different tunings to us, and I guess you could call that xenharmonic. But does it have any kind of cultural relevance to call that xenharmonic? I don't think it really does. Because what I want to explore is something that's non-traditional. Although sometimes I do want to explore something traditional, so I'll use that kind of tuning. We don't really have a word for that at the moment. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I mean, like it's very West-centric, isn't it?
Yeah, ironically.
To use that word being like like for people who grow up with different tunings to 12 equal temperament, maybe cultural tunings, it's not xenharmonic. It's just music. Like it's just the way it sounds.
I don't think people are used to discussing tuning at all, just in general. So I know a lot of Western musicians who listen to Eastern music quite a bit, and they don't really think about the tuning. And I'd say that lots of traditional Eastern music doesn't alarm a Westerner's ear in the same way that some very, very xenharmonic music does.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to say, I guess because it makes sense within the cultural context. In that, like you can hear like a Palog scale played on traditional Balinese instruments, and you can be like, oh, it sounds like Balinese music. But when it's played on a guitar, or say like a regular piano, it's like it's a whole different quality because
yes, that's it. Yeah, that's really important. I'd agree with that.
I guess that tunings don't exist in a vacuum, that they're always paired with other things that signify that you're listening to the music of a particular culture.
Yeah.
And when you mix those things about, it sounds very jarring because, certainly when I've played Balinese scales on a piano, it's just something I've done. It just doesn't, it's just not quite right.
It's also interesting that if you use something like a very simple mode with, at least 5 to 7 notes perhaps, that you can get people to mistake it for Eastern sounding scales. So I think as long as you're drawing from a simple set of notes and not using too many chromatic inflections, then people are going to accept it even if they think it sounds a little strange. There are some people who can't tell the difference between like, a bizarre xenharmonic 7-note mode and say like a 12-tone equal tempered scale that's Phrygian and Dorian at the same time. So it's interesting to think about that too.
Yeah. I find it really interesting when people are playing with like higher prime scales and they can mess with the harmonic frequencies to make it sound not so jarring.
Yeah.
Like with electronic music, you have that capacity to mess around and I guess like create your own context as to which to lend legitimacy to some more more disconcerting dissonant scales.
Absolutely.
Not that I've never toyed around with that before, but I would love to.
It seems like there's just so many things to do.
Yeah.
And all of us want to be doing, some other thing that we haven't done. So really, I think the number of ways you can explore tuning systems is fairly endless. And the best part was it was sort of endless before. Before I learned about microtonality, you could still do endless things with 12 notes, but you can do endless things with tunings as well. But I ultimately think that this endlessness is better. It's like the difference between the infinitude of rational numbers and the infinitude of real numbers. They're both infinity, but the real numbers just have infinitely more. It doesn't make any sense, but I think it does in this context. So yeah, I'm interested in the reals and not the rationals. Maybe both.
Going on from that, what is it that you guys want to explore that you haven't explored yet?
Oh man, that's a big question. Do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah. I want to. Up until now, my exploration has mainly been in tunings that can be defined up to its period of or its interval of equivalence. So, for example, if it's an octave bass scale, that tuning is defined. Well, it starts at 1/1, and then there are some notes in the middle, and then it ends with an octave, and then that gets repeated across the entire audible range. But I want to start working with things where I take that as my basis, but then there is detuning done to create kind of like what we were talking about with the psychoacoustic effects earlier on, and with things like beating frequencies and stuff like that. I want to do more in the way of seeing how I can tune an entire audible range where there may be some detuning that's not linear across the entire range.
I love that idea.
Where there's changes in different regions. So that's like just one thing of like a million things.
Yeah.
But hopefully by now I've given Stephen enough time to think of what his thing is.
I'm like trying to write down like a little summary, and of course there's so much to do. One thing I really want to do is have like 6 good songs with lyrics, maybe not, in each equal temperament from like 11 up. And so far that's not coming close to being done, but eventually I think we'll get there. I just don't know if I consider those compositions or not. They're high quality enough to be considered that, but they are too much like songs for the academic people. I think there's an implication that if you write something with real melody and chords and things that use like harmony and melody that make sense, that involve pitch and rhythm that can be quantized, that's not experimental enough for some people. So xenharmonics almost seems like a step backwards for some of them, but I don't think it is. So
isn't it funny being stuck between those two worlds?
Yeah,
I guess between. I studied at university, and I do think that as microtonalists we have a responsibility to not just look beyond tunings, not just explore that, but explore every new avenue in music. I think it's good that we use this unexplored territory as a way to springboard into something totally different, or at least try to.
Absolutely.
I say that having made a bunch of pop songs in microtonal music.
Well, that's good though. People need pop songs, I think, or at least a greater portion of people will be convinced by pop songs than like really dramatic or music where you have to be highly invested in it. At least that's what I consider to generally be dramatic music. Like if your full attention is on it and it's sort of taking you on a journey, as opposed to one state that blends with other things.
Yeah.
I know that some things that I want to do here, I've written down 4 things,
Okay.
which these 4 things are things that I haven't really done yet. One thing I want to do is I want to experiment a lot more with non-octave tunings. I'm approaching a place where very, very few things sound xenharmonic to me anymore. And one of the last...
Oh no, you've gone too deep, Stephen.
Yeah, I have. One of the last frontiers left is non-octave worlds. And there are so many unexplored non-octave tunings. So I'd love to do some songs with some really, really bizarre, obscure non-octave tunings. Perhaps really, really dissonant ones. Featuring things like, arpeggiating up a big chord and using my weird high voice to get up there. But then by the time I get up there, it's, the octaves are making it more and more off. So there's a lot of stuff that can be done with that. I want to write a piece that is very virtuosic and scary with a sliding line pitch. So the notation that I would be reading as a singer is a graph showing cent values, and I'm sliding along with the line and then looping myself with that line. And I know I could do it. I just need to practice a lot. And of course, the quantization would need to be justified by using a lot of different crazy things. So there's that. I also want to write a lot more with transfer, which is changing tuning systems mid-piece. I have done pieces where it's multi-movement and the movements are different tunings, but that's fairly rare for me. So I do want to do a big piece where like I'm singing some ostinato over and over, but I'm slightly changing the intonation each time the tuning in the background changes. So I'd want it to sound sort of like the Jacob Barton piece that was on the last episode, like Klezmer Joy, with like the rhythm changing over time in a really cool way, just like the tuning. And then, of course, I want to do things with tuning and timbre to confuse pitch perception, but a lot of people already do that last one, so I don't know. I kind of just want to be a big show-off so that if anyone is like, oh, well, you can't sing in this tuning, I'll just be like, yes, you can. Here's something that you can observe just in case you're thinking.
I gotta say, like, I don't doubt it, but that's just literally never happened to me. Maybe I just don't hang out with enough microtonalists. But yeah, it's usually like, I can't really sing in any tuning without any bearing on what it is. It's like it's interesting you brought up non-octave tunings, because that's a thing I really want to explore as well.
They're really hard.
I don't know how it's going to sound in any way, but that's the exciting bit.
Absolutely.
I really want to mess around with tritaves, and I think might have been Iglesian brought up 29 equal divisions of 2 octaves as a cool idea.
That's one of his favorite non-octaves, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of like halfway between 14 and 15 Edo. In a way of thinking, yeah.
Oh, that's bizarre.
Just trying to think of how it would work out melodically.
Well, the fifth would be in a good place then.
Yeah,
since it's between the 7 equal and 5 equal fifth. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, interesting. I'm not really like at the moment I'm trying to get out of 5 limit intervals and 3 limit intervals, because I don't really care that much about nice smooth JI major thirds anymore, because it's like they're beautiful and nice, but I love the electricity of like a flat fifth or like a sharp third. It's just like that discontentment does far more for me than hearing something played purely. Which is nice and has its place. But have you guys listened to Lamont Young's well-tuned piano?
Oh yes.
Yep.
That's great. With the really small
awesome?
different stones. Yeah.
I love that piece because it really highlights the I guess like what you can do without 5 limit intervals.
Yes.
It just has such like an awesome, because apparently Lamont Young hated it. He hated the 5/4 ratio. He hated
really.
I didn't know that. It was on Kyle Gann's website. He did like a write up about well-tuned piano. He hated it so much, so he used like I forget the major third he used, but I love that piece of music because the first time it plays that major third, it's a very sharp major third.
It's a complex ratio, right?
Yeah,
Not 9/7.
A bit more complex, and I think it's like 430 cents or something. Like it's a bit sharp.
Yeah,
and the first time he plays it, he like plays it just once, and it's like so delicate because it's almost like tentative, like he knows how challenging it is, but it's played like with just like such beautiful like delicacy. It's just played so softly, and then he sort of just brings it in more and more, and then by the end of the piece, Kyle Gann wrote this. By the end of the piece, you can't really imagine a major third any other way.
Yeah, once it's been drilled into your head for 5 or 8 hours, then you can't imagine a lot of things by that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I used to.
I do love that music. It's so beautiful.
It's awesome. I used to sit in my car. I just leave university and drive next to the beach, and then sit in the car park and just like listen to that very, very loudly.
Yeah. I guess piano sounds are a really interesting subject for microtonality. And you mentioned Kyle Gann. His Hyperchromatica CD, I think, is one of the best things I've heard in microtonality that's clearly, robotic piano that's not played by a human, because he uses sort of the tropes of a MIDI sound and the beats in special ways that make things very pleasing and exciting, and especially like the really complex chord clusters he uses. I think he goes up to 13 limit, but there are lots of times where, in 12 equal, maybe if you were playing a low chord that was major and then some kind of polychord up high, it would sound discordant because you were in 2 different keys, but he uses JI versions of those kinds of structures. And then, like, there's one song, I don't quite remember it, but it starts with some really cool low, like, 7 limit, 11 limit sonority that's like a triad, and then he plays something that sounds kind of like a diminished chord up high that's completely unrelated, but they lock into each other. And even though it's not a human playing the piano, like, just the beauty of that sound alone, I think, is enough to, like, take someone away to a different place, kind of like the Lamont Young piece can do. So, yeah.
Isn't that a great album? Hyperchromatica.
It's fantastic, yeah.
I honestly haven't listened to it enough, but I remember the first piece I heard from that was Space Cat. You guys heard Space Cat? Yeah. In the liner notes, he's like got like a little bit about each of the tunings he used, like very like detailed notes, and then when it gets to Space Cat, it just says, "It occurred to me in a dream I needed to call this song Space Cat." And then that's it.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
That's all you need.
Yeah, there you go.
All you need is to train.
Right, well, thanks, Jack, for being on the show. We really appreciate having you. Again, you're in 4 projects. Oh, wait, let me see if I get them right. Maybe Pile, Wollongong, Basil's Kite, and yourself. As for the podcast, you can find us on Libsyn, iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. Yes, those are the sites that our podcast is on. Our next episode will drop on March 12th. From now on, we have 1 episode each month that's dropping on the 12th because, we hate 12. Sometimes we have an additional surprise episode, so 1 a month on the 12th, and then occasionally an additional episode. That's it for the episode. Thanks, everybody.
There's been a spirit
That was Bug by Jack Tickner.